Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. Among the demands by groups protesting the death of George Floyd is a call to, quote, defund the police. What does that even mean? Sounds pretty radical, right? I mean, who's going to protect us? Who's going to respond to calls for help? Well, defunding the police doesn't really mean what it sounds like, which is confusing because of, well, those three words right there on the screen, defund the police. But most see it really as a call to reallocate some of the money given to police departments. Instead, send it to other programs in the community dealing with education, housing, mental health services, youth development. It's also about recognizing that maybe police officers aren't best suited to take care of all of society's problems that they are tasked with. And that's okay.
Before we started seeing the protest here in Charlotte, you actually spoke with Police Chief Kurt Putney. What's your relationship like with him?
Oh boy. I don't even know how to describe our relationship. I mean, we speak, we've yelled at one another, we've really gone at it at times. And I think now we're at a point where we can disagree respectfully. You know, like he'll listen to me, I'll listen to him. We might not agree with one another, but we'll listen. We're at a point where I think we're kind of hearing one another.
That right there is Cass Otley. She is a local activist who has been critical of the police for years. We're going to hear more from her coming up in just a minute. But first tonight, Charlotte City Council voting to spend more than 40% of its operating budget on policing, which would give CMPD nearly $300 million. That is obviously here the biggest chunk of this pie chart. Compare that to the nearly 3% the city is allocating toward housing and neighborhood services, and the less than 1% going toward economic development. One city council member doesn't want any money given to CMPD to go toward buying new chemical agents.
What I am proposing is the prevention of spending any dollars on the purchase of chemical agents for use of dispersal of crowds or for crowd control in the fiscal year of 2021.
Councilman Braxton Winston. Now that proposal comes after this video went viral last week. It's gotten a lot of criticism from people in the community. And Chief Kurt Putney has already made policy changes to prevent anything like that from happening in the future. The department is also being reviewed internally and externally because of it.
I want to show everything, so full context is seen, including why officers were using chemical agents in the first place. And that is because of violent, assaultive behavior towards them, bricks, rocks, frozen water bottles.
So let's hear more from someone who has been on the ground during these protests. WBTV anchor Alex Giles spent some time talking to activist Cass Otley, learning more about what she does and why she does it.
It's Wednesday, June 3rd, one of several nights of protesting here in uptown Charlotte after the death of George Floyd. On this particular night, Cass Otley, the leader of Seeking Justice Charlotte, has allowed me to follow her through the streets.
See what we're working with.
I sat down with her the next day for an interview.
When you heard and saw what happened to George Floyd, were you surprised?
I think I was surprised at how long that video was.
When you see something like that, how does it make you feel?
I was really angry. Matter of fact, I wanted to figure out how far of a drive was it to get there? How much did it cost to fly? I went through all of that because I was like, we got to show up.
But she decided to stay here in Charlotte, helping to organize local events and protests.
This is deep. Do you hate the police?
Do I hate the police? I hate what they do, and I have a lot of reason to. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of lives just destroyed.
Otley tells me she's been protesting about police use of force and incidents involving officers for several years.
We continue to see situations like with what happened with George Floyd. Why do you continue to protest?
I'm going to protest probably until I can't protest anymore. Because I feel like it brings awareness to the situation, but it's only one level of what we do. You know, when you're fighting for justice and you're fighting for equality and you're fighting for all these things, there's a lot of levels. You know, protest brings awareness. Like during Keith Lamont Scott, CNN was here. We had Telemundo here. Everybody was like, Charlotte, you know, so people were like, wow, you know, this is going on in Charlotte. So it put pressure on the leaders and people here because they were embarrassed.
What do you think about the peaceful protests versus the folks who want to, you know, kind of rile stuff up in the streets?
I mean, I get it, you know, and I can't be the one to tell people how to show up, you know. And I get the anger, I get the outrage, and I get all of that. But when that happens, you're putting a lot of people at risk. Especially, like, if you have kids in your crowd, you might have pregnant women in your crowd, you might have people that can't run in your crowd. You know, that's a problem. That's a problem. But you never can control who comes out to protest.
While many George Floyd protests have happened right in the heart of Uptown, some gatherings have happened in other parts of the city.
Tell me what democracy looks like!
Otley decided to organize a justice walk, holding it in Myers Park, one of the city's most affluent communities.
Tell me about Myers Park. That was a huge event. Did you expect that to be that big?
I knew it was going to be big, but I didn't know it was going to be that big. And I was really excited because, one, no one has ever done anything in Myers Park. And two, why are we protesting in our neighborhood? You know, we know Black Lives Matter. So we need to go with the power and the white privileges, and we need to go let those people know.
The crowd marched for hours. Young, old, black, white, even a few members of the Carolina Panthers showed up. It's one of the many peaceful gatherings we've had here in Charlotte. But will all of the protests, all of the events, all of the chanting make a difference?
You hear a lot of people say that they feel hopeless when things like this happen. That doesn't seem to be the case with you.
Because if I feel hopeless and I'm supposed to be an organizer, who's going to move the people? So I feel like that's my job, to motivate and move the people and just keep them focused on what we have to do. We all have talents, we all have gifts. So just pull into all of that and, you know, just really keep people focused.
You really do hear hope in her voice, don't you? Alex joins us now live from Myers Park. That's where that big justice walk was held last week. And Alex, this week here, a lot of talk about defunding the police. Curious, what does Cass want to change about the department?
Jamie, she took it one step further than defunding the police. I specifically asked her, you know, what do you want to see change about policing in our society? And she told me point blank, I would prefer a society where we don't necessarily have the police. And I told her, I said, you know, when you say things like that, people are going to hear you and say, you know, that's crazy. And she said, I completely understand that. But at the same time, she said that's her opinion. And she said for years she's been going to, you know, listening sessions and different meetings after situations happen with the police. And she's been a part of those constructive conversations with city leaders, but yet still she thinks that's the best option in her opinion, Jamie, a society without police, as radical as that idea seems.
It was fascinating to have her sort of struggle for words to describe her relationship with Chief Putney. Obviously, they've talked many times about all of these things. And I also understand she had some folks reach out to her after that big Myers Park event. What happened there?
Yeah, it's interesting. She told me that actually after she had that big event, she had some folks who live in, you know, the Dilworth, Myers Park area reach out to her and say, we really liked what you did. How can we get involved with that? Because, you know, that was a positive event. It happened, you know, before the sun had completely set. You know, you had people from all walks of life out at that event. And she said there were people that, you know, she wouldn't normally hear from that came to her and said, you know, how can we get involved? What can we contribute? How can we keep this conversation going? And so she actually has already had conversations with some folks from those communities about what they can do in the future, Jamie.
And that's one of the things that's been different about what we've been seeing here over the past couple of weeks. Ballantyne yesterday, Waxhaw last week. Many places that don't normally see these types of protests now getting involved. Curious too, I understand she works in public education, correct? So what are her peers thinking about all this?
Right. I asked her that, and she said she thinks that they like that she's, you know, an activist and a community leader. And she mentioned the fact that, you know, she works with young kids and one of the local elementary schools and talked about how they've seen her on TV before, and she thinks that they get a kick out of that. But she thinks it's also important that they can see that, hey, you know, somebody normal from my neighborhood, from my community, my city, can be out here advocating for change, can be out there trying to make a difference. So she thinks that her peers and the students she works with, you know, really like what she does on the side, Jamie.
Getting past the 10-second soundbite and really getting to the why. I know so you're going to be working on this all week long. Alex, terrific stuff. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you. Coming up next.